Hey guys, welcome to Let Hallie Read. Today I'm going to be giving you some classic book recommendations if you are a beginner to the classics. First one is an obvious choice. It is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. It is very accessible and it's super short. It's 9 chapters long. You can get it done in one setting. It will take you less than a day, less than a couple hours to finish that book. And so why not? The Great Gatsby is about a man named Jay Gatsby. Nick Carraway is the narrator, and Nick meets Jay Gatsby, gets to know him, and Jay Gatsby is this mysterious character. He has come into a lot of money, but it definitely talks about the differences between old money and new money. It was the 1920s, so you're gonna get a lot of like the lost generation, life after World War I, and that Prohibition era. Covers a ton of topics that were going on in the 1920s in America, and I think it gives such a unique perspective of what America was going through during that time. Number 2 is a more gothic romance book, and it is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. So the book is about Jane Eyre, and she is an orphan. She grew up in an orphanage, and when she gets older, she goes and lives with Mr. Rochester and is the teacher for his ward. She then finds out a lot of secrets about the house, and that's as much as I'm going to tell you on that one because the secrets are pretty juicy. I would consider it a classic gothic story, maybe gothic romance, but definitely gothic novel. Jane Eyre is really, really accessible. It is long, but I don't think that should intimidate you. There's a lot of things that happen, and it's one of my favorite books in general. Another gothic author who was active more in like the 1790s was Anne Radcliffe. She was a very famous gothic author, and I've never actually read any of her books, so I can't really recommend any to you, but if you are into gothic literature, you might check her out as well. My third recommendation is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is for you who like horror, and it is about a man, Dr. Frankenstein, who creates a monster, a person, a being, using different body parts. I read this book when I was in a class in college, and I actually did not think I was going to like it as much as I did, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm not a horror person, so I really enjoyed it. It's just one of those really kind of easy to get through books. It's a book that many people have read for colleges and high schools, but it's really compelling, and it's really just really good. I didn't want that to be part of my recommendation, like read it because it's good, but it is very good. Number 4 is a Jane Austen book. So I was thinking of Jane Austen books that would be super accessible, and you would think that I would recommend Pride and Prejudice, but I actually wouldn't. I would recommend Emma. Emma is hilarious. That's kind of the biggest reason why I would recommend that one, is because it's funny. Take the movie Clueless, for example. Clueless is an adaptation of Emma, and there have been a ton of adaptations of Emma. Go check them all out. They're amazing. Emma is pretty rich enough in that time period where she really doesn't have to get married, because that's really the only way that a woman could stay single, is if she came from a very rich family and she could afford to be single. So, and Emma can, and she has no want or desire to be married. She loves being on her own. I love Emma's independence. That's like one of my very favorite things about her. She's also very naive. She tries to play matchmaker for all these different people, and sometimes it works, but most of the time it does not. And she's so concentrated and concerned on other people's lives that she's not really seeing the things right in front of her. But it also causes like a lot of funny moments and very sweet and tender moments as well. I also think this is one of Jane Austen's most accessible works, and I know I keep saying accessible over and over and over again, but I think that is such an integral part of reading the classics for the first time, is being able to retain the information and understand what's going on. So moving on to number 5. Number 5 is a mystery, and it is from one of my favorite authors. It is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. Honestly, guys, you could read any of her works. She's super accessible, and she's a little bit more modern. I would consider her more of like a maybe like a modern classic, depending on your definition of modern classic. She's not in the same realm as like Victorian or Regency or anything like that, but she is amazing. And Then There Were None, all of these people go to this house on like an island, I think. It's been a minute since I've read the book. But they all get invited on this island. Someone dies, and obviously it has to be one of them. And so you're just going throughout trying to figure out who it might be. And Agatha Christie does not disappoint, because I have not read a book of hers where I knew who the killer was, and there's always a crazy twist. Great, number 6 is a classic dystopia for those of you who like dystopia novels, and I would recommend Brave New World by Aldous Huxley to you. 1984 is like another dystopia, but I felt like Brave New World was a lot more interesting and a lot more like thought-provoking in the way that, like, you know, would I want to live in this society? It's kind of interesting because most of the time when we read dystopian novels, we obviously think, you know, of course I wouldn't want to live there. Like, that seems awful. I would never want to live in that time. I don't want to live in the society of the Hunger Games. I don't want to live in the society of 1984. But Brave New World is interesting because it does make you question if you would want to live in this type of society. Brave New World is this society, I think it's like London, and everyone is now, no one is born anymore. They're all made in test tubes. You're genetically engineered and modified to fit into society wherever they want you to fit. So basically, if, you know, they want you to be a laborer, then they are going to engineer you and, you know, create your makeup to be a laborer. And you're going to be happy doing that. You know, that's the thing too, is they make sure that, you know, they make it foolproof that you are going to be happy with your life so that there is no rebellion. And then of course an outsider comes in from that society and sees how it is all so messed up and how it affects people's psyches. I felt like Brave New World was just a lot more compelling and a lot more thought-provoking and a lot more interesting too. I found myself getting a little bored with 1984. Brave New World was much, much easier to get through, which is why I'm adding it to this list. Number 7 is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I wanted to add some classic African-American literature in here. You can also check out Toni Morrison, but I again, going back to that word of accessibility, I think Their Eyes Were Watching God is just a little bit more accessible. Now, I haven't read Toni Morrison in a while, and I've only ever read Beloved. I need to probably read it again, but when it comes to accessibility and just kind of ease of reading, I think Their Eyes Were Watching God is a better place to start. Their Eyes Were Watching God is about a woman who was a former slave, and it's just kind of watching her go through life, meeting these different men, getting married, and watching how her treatment by men has really influenced her way of thinking. It just kind of goes through that hardship and just, I don't know, discovering who she is. So number 8 is a Charles Dickens recommendation, and this one was tough, guys. I honestly did not know where you could start with Charles Dickens because he's not always easy to read, to be honest. If you're going to start with Charles Dickens, I think Great Expectations is a great place to start. Great Expectations is about a young boy named Pip. He is like an apprentice. He's not rich, but he has a mysterious benefactor who puts him up and sets him up with a lot of money, and then he moves to London and enters high society. So there's a great character, probably one of the most iconic characters of Great Expectations, which is Miss Havisham, who gets who basically like lives in her old wedding dress, and like her house is dilapidated, and she is a fascinating character. Honestly, guys, the reason I recommended Great Expectations mostly is because of her character. She kind of steals the show in a lot of ways, and so I would highly recommend. And there's that little bit of a gothic element to it as well. And last recommendation is Shakespeare. If you're wanting to get into Shakespeare, I would recommend Much Ado About Nothing. So Much Ado About Nothing is about two people who cannot stand each other. They have a bit of a history, they have a past, but they can't stand each other, and they're kind of forced to be in this area with each other, and some things get miscommunicated, and they each get told that the other person likes them. So now they're like, what? They like me? And the other person's like, what? They like me? But really, it's all a big miscommunication, but it is so good. It's so funny. Those are my recommendations if you want to get started with the classics. If you have a classic recommendation that you would give to someone who is just starting out, drop that down in the comments below. I just based my recommendations off of books that I've read. I didn't really feel like it was right to recommend books that I have not read before. So if there is a book that you would recommend to a beginner, drop that down below. Thank you so much for sticking around. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you later.